Yes, I'm Jay Wilkinson, and I've been a judge on the Federal Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit since 1984. President Reagan appointed me, and I think more importantly, I'm a father of two children, and just had my first grandchild not so long ago. Yeah, I went to the University of Virginia Law School, and I went to Yale to college and came back to Virginia. And I came back to Virginia to law school because I thought, in addition to going into law, I might want to run for office in Virginia politics. And so it was a good thing, I thought, to return to the South and to Virginia and to begin to set up a political career. And I ran for Congress when I was in law school, 25 years old. And I took a sabbatical from law school to pursue this political career and run for the House of Representatives. And I was a Republican at the time and was facing a three-term Democratic incumbent. They had a very effective, my opponent had a very effective ad about me, which said, send Satterfield back to Congress and Wilkinson back to law school. So the voters took that to heart, and I said to a reporter the day after the election that I did indeed receive a mandate, and that was to return to my legal studies. So I did that, and then had the, after graduation from law school, an old family friend, Justice Lewis Powell, Jr., had been appointed to the Supreme Court. And he was kind enough, I'd interviewed with some other justices, but he, because of our connection, was kind enough to ask me to serve as his law clerk. And I was just thrilled and delighted to do that because of the profound regard I had for him. But frankly, it was a little bit scary because I was going right out of law school into this Supreme Court clerkship. Now, normally you have a year as an appellate court clerk, and some others have a year or two in private practice. And I took the bar one day and went to work for him the next. And so I had a steep learning curve. We worked very hard because this was his first year too. So in different ways, we were both starting off. But it was kind of fun to clerk for a Supreme Court justice the first year in their tenure, because they haven't come to rest on all these issues. And so instead of saying, well, I've done this I did this in such and such a case several years ago, they would the justice would ask the law clerks their opinion. We'd be thinking through things. He was a little bit surprised, I might say, that his major assistants were 20-somethings, as he'd been a managing partner at a major law firm, and he had people working for him who had decades of experience in the law, and all of a sudden, here we were with no practical experience, asking him what the mechanics of garnishment were, and he would just drop his jaw because of some of the things that we were asking. But it was an absolutely wonderful time. I could not have clerked for a finer man. Yeah, I mean, obviously the experience we have as a clerk remains with you through life, and I think having been a clerk, it's like if you're going to coach a football team, it's good to have played, and if you're going to deal with clerks, it's a good thing to have been a clerk yourself, and I think I understand a little bit what to expect of them, and it makes me more forgiving of some mistakes because I committed them egregiously myself. Makes me a little less forgiving of others because I know what Justice Powell expected of me. But it's invaluable experience in that sense. Well, we were doing what law clerks have always done, which is write certiorari memos, and we would do the first draft of an opinion, but I say that was the first draft because sometimes there were about 30 drafts. It was not unusual for him to put his imprint on it at every stage along the way, and he had this habit of putting in riders. We had an old dictaphone, and he would dictate a rider. And the term rider was supposed to mean he was going to ride on our efforts. Well, it actually supplanted them completely. And he would, sometimes I wondered why he wanted our first draft, because the opinion was so thoroughly his at the end of it all. So you pick up certain habits about approaching a case from clerking, and one of the habits that you try to pick up. I would never equal Justice Powell in this regard, but one of the things I tried to pick up from him was an essential modesty. And I would ask him, I would say, Justice Powell, why don't you ask more questions from the bench? And he would say, well, you only ask a question if you don't know the answer. And he was very modest about things. He didn't want to grab a lot of attention or to do this or that, but what he approached his task with this profound humility, which was that other colleagues had things to teach him, that he had things to learn from litigants, he had things to learn from his colleagues. And I've seen a person who recognized the limits of his own experience to such an extent that he knew that America was such a vast country with such different traditions and different cultures and the rest, and he was very sensitive to the fact that he'd only had a limited slice of experience in this very diverse country of ours, and so that gave him a certain modesty, I think, on the bench. And he would tell me, that sometimes the best knowledge is to know the limits of knowledge. So you have this enormous modesty in this very wise man. I mean, we would expect, given everything that he had done. He'd been in North Africa at the time of the Allied invasion in 1942. He'd worked with Ultra to try to break the German code. He'd been president of the American Bar Association. He had been on all sorts of blue ribbon commissions, and as I say, he was a managing partner of one of Virginia's most prominent firms. So you wonder, well, here's this person with all that experience, and he's so modest. And it made me believe that qualities of judicial restraint were very important in a judge. And much of that I got from him, just from his being humble when given his accomplishments. Most people would not be. He just taught by example, you know. He wasn't a didactic man, and he had the softest voice. He put his hand to his chin, and you had to listen real carefully sometimes to hear him. So I never heard him raise his voice or speak in anger to anyone. And a lot of the times you just watched what he did. I mean, he was a 24/7 person in terms of his work schedule. And you know, sometimes I would leave occasionally, take the Sunday off, and I'd come back Monday morning and look at the seat of my chair and find all kinds of things that he'd been working on Sunday. So you had to be very careful about taking Sunday off, because you were going to find out. And he wouldn't say, why did you take Sunday off, or that I've been working on Sunday. He would never say that. But you would find the work in the seat of your chair. It's mostly habits that he brought to all the cases. They're just things that amuse me. He said, well, I'm going to Florida to take a vacation, 1 week vacation. I said, well, enjoy yourself. I said, you know, you work so hard, Mr. Justice, you can afford to relax. Well, I got to Florida. The phone was ringing. The mail was coming back and forth. He would want to know what was going on. And it's not that he, you know, didn't relax. He did on several times, but he just had a wonderful work ethic. And people say, well, that's not good, but it was good for him because he really enjoyed it. I mean, I've never quite seen someone that took so much pleasure in his work. He had his recreational pursuits, and particularly with his family, because he was such a great family man and he took so much interest in his daughters, but he genuinely took as much pleasure in just working as almost anyone I know.